anyone do drugs when they could just mow a lawn?
Burning sage has become a trend on social media. So what happens to a marginalized culture when its rituals go viral?
With California in the midst of a historic drought emergency, tonight some of the biggest names in Hollywood are finding themselves in hot water. The Kardashians, Dwayne Wade, Sylvester Stallone, and Kevin Hart, among the 2,000 plus customers warned for excessive water usage.
People work up to 13 hours a day for weeks, cutting, stripping, stacking, and wrapping over and over again.
Created by chemical giant Monsanto, Roundup is the most widely used weed killer on Earth. Sprayed on everything from gardens, it is quite simply everywhere. The stuff can kill you.
It sounds like something straight from a murder mystery. Looking at plants and how they can connect a suspect to a crime. That data can connect the boots of a suspect to a certain elevation or field where a crime was committed.
All right, so now we're in my backyard.
But some celebrities failing to play their part. Properties belonging to Kim and Kourtney Kardashian using a combined excess of 333,000 gallons of water, enough to fill up half of an Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Hey guys, it's me Lavender here, and today I'm Biles. Today I want to do the Pure Evil, the lawn and gardening industry files. Deep dive into this topic about capitalism, decolonization of your garden lawns, the history, true crime, etc. Originally, I actually saw this topic on Twitter, and I wanted to talk about it and stuff, and do it from my anti-capitalism, decolonization perspective. So yeah, but first I'm going to put videos, my YouTube videos on the screen now that are related to this topic, if you'd want to check them out. So let's get started into this YouTube video. So yeah. Big Pharma, etc. So as we approach the start of lawn and gardening season, it's a good time to ask some questions about its origins. Whether you plan to get marigolds, plant a vegetable garden, or create a pollinator patch, or even mowing your lawn. All gardens and lawns have a complicated roots and history. In fact, the practice of manicured lawns and gardening is deeply tied and rooted to colonialism, from the formation of botany as a science to the spread of seed species and knowledge. Americans love to manicure their lawns. It is a sign of pride and home ownership deeply seated in the American dream. If you don't believe me, watch King of the Hill. He loves his, lawn. To buy a house in the suburbs and raise a family. This dream, however, bellies deeper into the roots in settler colonization and white supremacy. It wasn't until well into the 20th century that the lawn became a status symbol of escaping poverty. Americans, overwhelming majority of them white Americans, were able to move from crowded cities and rural landscapes to the newly formed suburbs designed to look like one continuous lawn space from house to house. Conformity to lawn care standards was and is still a sign of that one is a good neighbor. This was the destruction of native biodiversity. The land was stolen. The white settlers drastically changed landscapes through the destruction and replacement of native biodiversity to accommodate new economies. Moreover, majority of American suburbs have a history of racist redlining to keep out people of color. Some of the most recognizable plants today, such as tulips, for example, are the result of colonial conquest. Later, after they were hybridized to commodified by the Dutch, they became highly converted status symbol because their gorgeous but fleeting blooms. Exploratory botanical voyages by colonial European powers were integral to the expansion of the U.S. empire and other empires. These trips fueled the big business of collecting global plant samples and also led to the emergence of botany as a scientific discipline and science genre. Botanical gardens serve as labs. Botanical gardens played a key role, serving as the laboratories where plant speciesism were organized, ordered, and named. Scientific objectivity asserted a Eurocentric point of view, disrupting and displacing indigenous knowledge and ecological practices. The movement and transfer of plants around the world went in hand with the transportation of people to provide a labor force through slavery and servitude. The plantation system cleared out local ecosystems and, native wild diversity and replaced traditional farming methods with growing cash crops like sugarcane, tea, and cotton. These were products meant for European curiosities, markets, and profit for not the local populations. This colonial system of organizing agriculture laid the groundwork for categorizing people in a similar way, establishing a social hierarchy which dehumanized non-Europeans, helping justify slavery and indigenous genocide, and eventually leading to racial categories. This history has shaped our current relationships to the land and our gardens. It also informs beliefs about land ownership and access, who has the right to enjoy the land versus who's expected to be working on it. Take, for example, the anti-foraging laws, for example. They were pretty much solely made to oppress black people and indigenous people so they wouldn't even have their own independence. And they'd be reliant, on the racist system. Rewilding gardens is a political act in the Caribbean, for example, one of the most actively colonized regions in the entire world. People who grew up on these islands watching middle-class islanders cut down native fruit trees and growing around their homes because their leaves, blossoms, and the fruit that would fall off and start rotting had dirtied their American-style lawns and attracted rats in the area because they preferred to eat the imported fruits of the colonizers instead, the apples and pears they could not grow in their warm climate. They argued that only unsophisticated country folk or people kept those dirty tropical fruit trees. They were not the trees of modernity. In Puerto Rico, this means allowing for avocado, bananas, coconuts, coffee, mangoes, and pineapples, as well as herbs and vegetables. Many think some of these native are to these areas, but they are not. They were imported from Africa, China, and India early on during Spanish colonization. These naturalized trees need to be balanced with native and regional fruit bushes and trees like guavas, papayas, passion fruit trees, etc., because they are much more resilient to plagues and hurricanes that are common in those areas. They attract a larger number of endemic and native pollinators. They harbor a lot more endemic and native insect life, and they provide critical nesting sites and food for, native birds and bats in the area. Saving bees and other pollinators call for the decolonization of lawns. Monarch butterflies and over 3,600 bee species are some of the pollinators within the United States that are critical and crucial to the biodiversity, ecological health overall. Yet they are declining and getting extinct in population. This is mainly due to capitalism. Capitalism caused climate change crisis. Bees, for instance, don't do well in too cold or too hot areas, and climate change is playing a huge role in the declining of the bees, for example. The toxic pesticides are the reason for, all these insects going extinct as well. Pollinator plants help nourish the ecosystems entirely, as their existence helps fuel pollinators to sustain the global food production supply chain. About 75% of crops depend on these pollinators for their production, mostly fruits and nuts. Without bees or butterflies or whatever insects, wasps, etc., the earth would die off and no food would be produced. Lawns are home for another bug such as beetles, worms. Worms help with soil health. They attract birds such as starlings that feed on the invertebrates hidden below. They also help rainwater to drain away. The soil is shifting. There is a growing shift away from the colonial status symbol of the lawn and manicured gardens in favor of pollinator-friendly native plants and aka decolonization of your lawn and garden areas. Your garden is a protest. It is a place of defiant compassion and passion. It is a space to help sustain native wildlife and ecosystem function, helping promote biodiversity since capitalism is the number one cause of biodiversity loss and wildlife extinction. How to decolonize your lawn or garden. Hands off the mower. If you stop mowing your whole lawn or part of it for a month or for a season, you can create a busy wildlife habitat and a biodiversity area. Plants already present will have the chance to grow and bloom, aiding into the biodiversity. Clover seeds may already be in your lawn as they are used to be included in packets of lawn seed. Other seeds get blown in or dropped by birds. You might also expect to see daisies, buttercups, etc. Even orchards might appear. The pollen and nectar of flowering plants will attract pollinating bees, butterflies, beetles, and more. Longer grass will provide shelter and somewhere for animals such as frogs, newts, hedgehogs, and lizards and reptiles to forage. Wherever your plans for your meadow creation or improvement, it is a good idea to let things grow, to see what's already there and whatever's native there. Dandelions, yarrow, and buttercups are all brilliant sources of food for these pollinators. Red clover flowers are a favorite of the common carter bee, red-tailed bumblebee, and many other long-tongued bumblebees. They are also popular with domesticated honeybees as well. As in white clover, clover helps prevent unwanted weeds from growing and makes lawns more resilient to drought. It also adds nitrogen to your soil, making it healthier, so it's worth composting mowed clippings. Some wildflower species are traditionally thought of as weeds because they spread easily, but they are actually very beneficial to bees and other pollinators. For example, the low-growing bird's foot trefoil. If you have a tree in your lawn, you can leave a border of grass to grow around it. Plant some flower bulbs such as daffodils, the native ones, and bluebells. These spring flowers are an important early source of nectar, helping bumblebee queens emerging from hibernation and the hairy-footed flower bee. For example, monarch butterflies only lay their eggs on milkweed, a native wildflower. It protects the caterpillars, because it gives them a bad taste from predators. Late in the summer, when the milkweed flowers, it provides nectar for the adult butterflies. On their way to their journey, they need to fuel up before migrating to Mexico. Avoid lawn treatment. Say no to pesticides. One of the easiest changes you can make to avoid weed killers and pesticides, since, for example, Roundup is a weed killer, and it kills dandelions, it causes cancer, and Big Pharma wants to keep you sick, as well as the environment sick. These weed killers kill off plants. Avoid buying plants, bulbs, seeds, or compost that contains pesticides or insecticides. A pesticide known as neon X, for example, are associated with mass honeybee die-offs and deaths, and harm wild bees as well. Research published in 2017 found that many garden plants labeled as pollinator-friendly aren't actually pollinator-friendly. When you put chemicals on the grass to kill dandelions, those chemicals go down into the ground and end up in the water we drink. Do you want to drink toxic chemicals just because you don't want to have to look at dandelions? Big Pharma wants to keep you sick at any cost, so they make mega capitalism profits. Dandelions are entirely edible and can be even made into tea, wine, etc., even salads. Since ancient times, to combat a wide range of ailments. Historically, it was commonly used to treat liver diseases, kidney diseases, digestive problems, spleen problems, and even for weight loss. Despite dandelions' bitter taste, it contains greater nutritional value than many other vegetables. In fact, it has more vitamin A than carrots. Researchers say dandelion root extract may fight cancer cells. Despite a homeowner's loathing of dandelions, most 5-year-olds, or kids in general, will tell you that they grant wishes. These 5-year-olds might actually be onto something. Dandelions could be a wish granted for those battling cancer. It might not be the magic of blowing the seeds from the stalk, but rather utilizing the plant for its unique immune-boosting, cancer-killing powers. Big Pharma wants to keep you sick, and these plants are getting in the way of that, so they're doing everything in their power to convince people, how bad they are and how they need to get rid of it with, weed killer and stuff like that. We have been gaslit. We have been seduced by the $32 billion per year chemical, fertilizer, herbicides, and pesticide industry who spends millions of dollars each year convincing us that we need to use this on the land. We must say no to Big Pharma. And fertilizer runoff causes a dead zone larger than New Jersey every year at the mouth of the Mississippi and the Gulf of Mexico, where fish, shrimp, crabs, and other sea life are unable to survive. By making your garden wildlife friendly, you are in fact encouraging natural predators such as birds, hoverflies, and parasitic wasps, which will help keep pests down and under control. Often viewed as a weed, moss provides food and shelter for invertebrates, so it's beneficial and lots of wildlife. Gardening with native plants is a great way to support bird health and birds as a whole, and birds need all the help they can get. Thanks to habitat loss, predation from cats, window collisions, and other threats, bird populations have since declined by 29% since 1970. Victims include common backyard birds like white-throated sparrows, the very types of birds that will flock to a native plant garden. The struggle to protect native plants, attitudes surrounding sharing indigenous ethobotany or medical, nutritional, and practical uses of plants for indigenous peoples have been shaped by a tug-of-war between the desire to document and need to protect this insight. Many of the plant species that native peoples relied on for generations, such as the Pacific yew tree, have increasingly become under threat from bioprospecting, the search for medicinal and commercial chemical compounds in living species. Others, such as beargrass, have been the subject of biopiracy and theft of natural resources or for the traditional knowledge they hold. There's another major threat to beargrass, however, that can't be combined with fire, the floral industry. Beargrass, a low-elevation plant that's easily accessible to both basket weavers and floral poachers, is being collected for bouquets that are then shipped around the world, and white basket makers snip the individual leaves they need. Commercial harvesters tend to chop off the entire plant, hindering the rejuvenation process of this culturally vital plant. The indigenous peoples of the Olympic Peninsula have long been subjected to the over-harvesting of their natural resources. The chemotherapy drug Taxol, for instance, is derived from the bark of the Pacific yew tree, which native people use to make sticks, to dig up bulbs for food, to craft durable canoe paddles, and to treat various ailments. And yet, so far, they've not received a share of the over $1 billion Taxol generates annually as a top-selling cancer drug. This just reinforces the trauma of don't share because it's not safe and we live in a capitalist society. Many of you have probably come across smudge bundles, aka sage, made from leaves and twigs of various plants that when burned produce aromatic smoke smell that some indigenous peoples use for ceremonial cleansing and purification. Since the 1960s, when hippies hijacked, the sage and aspects of indigenous culture, and furthered by the New Age movements idolizing of natural products, smudging has become increasingly widespread among non-natives. This is a classic example of cultural appropriation. This practice is now widely promoted in TVs, magazines, movies, social media, and other popular venues to buyers who think it'll bring spiritual beliefs and spiritual awareness. Most of these products are made from native plants, particularly Great Basin sagebrush and white sage, which are almost entirely harvested from the wild. Sustainable farming of this species, while theoretically possible, is currently all but non-existent. Early half of its original habitat has already been lost to urban development. As with other native plants in areas, remaining populations are threatened by climate change, drought, and wildfires. But the most immediate threat and impact to white sage is large-scale illegal harvesting of wild plants to make sage bundles for commercial sale. When it comes to the floral industry, aka the flower industry, the global flower production industry is worth approximately $64.5 billion. The dark side of the flower sector, the growing exploitation of workers and women in Kenya, and along with other countries. Buying flowers can be a great way to express love and friendship, or to simply brighten up a living room or brighten up someone's day. However, what people don't understand and realize is that some flowers hide a dark secret. Kenya's ideal tropical climate conditions make it a favorable location for growing flowers. It's a common place for people to be forced to work under threats, retaliation, intimidation, and in fear of losing their jobs. Workers are given very high targets which they are unable to meet despite working more than 12 to 14-hour shifts. Having failed to meet these targets, female workers are forced to finish the target the next day without pay or offer up a bribe or sexual favors, aka sexual harassment, to a supervisor to retain their jobs. Workers have no room to refuse these requests given their dependence on the income provided by their jobs. Valentine's Day is possible thanks to Colombian flower workers. Esmeralda has worked in the flower industry for so long that her body hurts. After 25 years of cultivating and packaging flowers, she was diagnosed in early February with chronic case of carpal tunnel syndrome. For Esmeralda, the holiday seasons are now dreaded dates on the calendar, especially Valentine's Day. But in Colombia, where Esmeralda lives, the lead up to the holiday is anything but festive. Thousands of mostly female workers make up the labor force, working up to 100 hours a week under poor conditions and poor pay, to satisfy the demand for flowers all over the world. You see a 25-stem bouquet and you say, look at how beautiful they are, but no one is aware of how much work goes into that and what the work I do and how it makes it into like stores and stuff. Well, Americans used to buy most of their flowers from local growers. In the 1960s, the industry migrated to Colombia where the equatorial sunlight lasts 12 hours a day year-round, and where workers are paid a fraction of American wages. In 1966, a Colombian agriculture worker earned a daily wage of just 82 cents, compared to the $16 earned by the U.S. counterparts. And by 1980, only the Netherlands outranked Colombia in flower exports. And again, to top it off, these workers suffer, like health problems, like physically, and they also, 2/3 of Ecuadorian flower workers suffer from headaches, nausea, miscarriages, and neurological problems, all related to exposure of toxic chemicals and pesticides. More than 2,000 people in exclusive California neighborhood, including celebrities such as Kevin Hart and Kim Kardashian and Kourtney Kardashian, have been put on a list of water offenders as drought ravages the state. Because, like having like extreme, big, piece of property, you're going to need a lot of water, to make your grass fully green throughout the whole entire year. In a blistering third year of drought, Californians have been asked to limit their indoor water usage to only 55 gallons, 208 liters per person per day. Yet in gay communities of Calabasas and Hidden Hills, California, home to the rich capless pigs with their bougie lifestyle aesthetics, in the Santa Monica Mountains above Malibu, lush salons filled with swimming pools and koi ponds make it clear that some are ignoring the rules. So officials have created a device to take power showers away from the rich and famous water hogs. Rich people are known, they want to get around the rules, just because they have a lot of money and stuff. Now let's talk about true crime and plants. True crime and crime scene botanicals. Forensic botany, where you use plant DNA and stuff to solve true crime cases. Early in January 1935, a man named Arthur worked his way through the crowds of people gathered outside the courthouse in Flemington, New Jersey. He was there to testify in one of the most important trials of the 20th century, the trial of Bruno Richard Hamptman for the kidnapping of a young man of aviation hero Charles Lindbergh and his wife Anne. She was an expert on wood anatomy and identification, and what was unique about the particular testimony he was about to give was that it dealt with the structure of wood, namely the wood of the ladder used by the kidnapper. Presenting that kind of evidence was highly unusual. There was little precedent for it, and it was not clear it would even be allowed. The use of scientific expert witnesses was an uncommon and limited practice at the time, and botanical evidence had little standing in criminal courts. The defense argued strongly against allowing the doctor to testify, saying, "There is no such animal known among men as an expert on wood. That is not a science that has been recognized by the courts. That is not a class within the handwriting experts, with fingerprint experts, or ballistic experts." Subsequently went on the trial to demonstrate how the wood of the ladder, beyond any doubt, linked the perpetrator directly to the crime. Presented with three types of information from a study of the ladder. 1. Identification of the wood used. 2. Physical marks left by the tools on the wood. 3. Comparisons of the wood structure. He was able to determine the wood used in the ladder was of 4 kinds, Douglas fir, and 2 types of pine, and some other evidence as well. They were able to show in the trial that the attic board and the ladder rail had once been a single board by the exact match of annual rings, and importantly, he demonstrated the patterns of annual rings are unique, that no other random board would have an absolutely identical pattern. Just as today we demonstrate that the portions of our DNA are unique to each individual. The wood and anatomical evidence ultimately was the most incriminating and unshakable pieces of evidence that led to the conviction and eventual electrocution for the kidnapping. Since that trial, what is termed forensic botany, or the use of plants to remains to help solve crimes or other legal problems, has been widely accepted as valid scientific evidence by the courts. It has been featured in the true crime show Forensic Files, as well on the episode called Planted Evidence. In 1992, single mother Denise Johnson is found dead in a deserted area outside of Phoenix, Arizona. Local investigators asked a molecular geneticist to pick out a tree in a lineup. When unidentified seed pods are found in the suspect's Mark's truck, the judge rules that evidence DNA profiles linking the pods to tree near where the body was found. This is the first U.S. case where plant DNA was used to convict a criminal. Some other true crime cases include Home Depot supplier hit with $200,000 in fines over labor violations. The owner of a plant nursery that kept migrant workers in unsafe housing in Georgia and supplied plants of Home Depot has been hit with over $200,000 in fines from the U.S. Department of Labor. Investigators found additional violations, including wage theft violations. If a total amount fined, over $17,000, will go towards back wages owed to one worker. Arizona Landscaping Company ordered to pay over $92,000 in back wages to employees. The U.S. District Court for the District of Arizona ordered Artificial Grass Masters of Purita, operating as Artificial Grass Masters and Sunscreens for less, and owner Joshua to pay over $92,000 in back wages and $92,000 in liquidated damages to 66 employees. This order comes after the U.S. Department of Labor investigation found that the Phoenix-based area landscaping company and its owner had used illegal pay practices, lied to investigators, and more. Investigators had determined the employer paid workers in cash and off the books, denied overtime pay, lied to the investigators, and intimidated the workers. And in another true crime case, a New Jersey landscaping company that failed to pay its employees nearly $530,000 in overtime has agreed to properly compensate the workers. Fullerton Grounds Maintenance has been fined $20,000 by the State Department of Labor.